We're here with Kyle McIntyre, co-founder of UDTJ. He also started the Pride Parade in Delco, also an Upper Darby council person, and chairs the Planning and Zoning Committee, as well as the Legislative Affairs Committee for the township. That's a lot of intros. I do want to start with zoning. I do want to dive into data centers and flock and ALPRs later, but specifically for zoning, I do know that there is a few different classifications that a developer can come through. Can you explain those classifications of zoning?
So, okay, I'll just go through the zoning process because there's always the thing with Pennsylvania zoning law, which I feel like people don't understand, is like there's always caveats and there's always exceptions. It's a very complex process. It's done that way. You know, when people complain about bureaucracy, they're usually complaining about our land development or zoning process, because when you see the graph, which is kind of horrific and kind of scary because there's so many different government agencies that have involvement even in the construction of one single house. That's actually why you saw federal legislation recently, the one that was sponsored by Elizabeth Warren and I forget the Republican guy. But it is a problem. It is a problem to some degree. But in Pennsylvania, it's also sometimes our biggest advantage, especially when it comes to constituents. So zoning is broken down into mainly 3 different categories. So one, as you were saying, is by right. By right means you're allowed to do it in the zoning code, in your local approved zoning code. You don't need to go to the zoning hearing board or ask for special permission. But depending on the size and scale of the development, it still has to go through the land development process. So it still might need approval through your planning commission. It still may need final subdivision if you're turning a plot of land into like a bunch of tiny plots of land. So like you're turning a large lot into a bunch of...
I guess, real quickly, what determines whether you do need approval from the planning commission? Because usually it's just advisory only, right?
Yeah, so usually planning commission is involved when it's usually in subdivisions. So anytime you're taking a lot of land and you're, subdividing it into tinier plots. So if I'm selling off a large lot and I'm turning it into a bunch of single-family homes, those single-family homes are going to become new plots of land that are going to be privately owned. So that has to get approved and reviewed. Anytime you're dealing with stormwater management, anytime you're dealing with stormwater management, one that always just comes up. So that's the one that always like hits my head. It depends on the zoning code. There are a couple of other triggers that can be added manually in a zoning code. So sometimes parking can be one of them. Usually parking is actually where a lot of developers run afoul. That's usually when your zoning hearing board or your your planning or zoning gets involved. So by right usually just means you don't have to ask for special permission. So you can submit a subdivision, you can submit a land development proposal, and basically the entire process begins. Sometimes, depending on the...
Yeah, so by right residents don't get a hearing?
No, not usually. Not usually. Depending on the size and scale and the complexity occasionally, but mostly no. Then there's 2 others. Special exception, which people get this one wrong all the time. There's special including elected officials, by the way, when they're writing their zoning codes. There's special exception, and then there are variances. Special exceptions is basically approval with condition. People think special exception gives governments a reason to deny applications. It does not. It's like you're 80% approved, but you just need to prove this last 20%. It becomes very difficult for governments to make that.
I thought that was spot zoning.
No, spot zoning. It's funny because we talk about spot zoning with the current Mosino track, and the reason why that isn't considered spot zoning compared to others. Spot zoning would be like if I didn't like somebody in a neighborhood, so I turned their house into industrial, just their house. The entire block, still residential, just their house. Or turn it into a data center. A data center, just their house. Like that would be spot zoning, right? Spot zoning is considered a term that is used when government, I wish I could say that there's not a historical precedent, but there were governments that were petty and then would use the powers of government against residents. So hence why some of these rules were put in place. They were not put in place because a lot of land, when the surrounding land use matches it, shouldn't be. The size of the lot does not determine spot zoning. It's the conditions of the properties around it that determine spot zoning. So
got it.
It can still be one lot that's changed.
What determines whether something can be spot zoned? What determines that?
Well, what determines what can be spot zoned? Well, nothing determines. Okay. sorry, let me rephrase that. You can't do spot zoning. Spot zoning is not allowed at all. So it's one of those things that if you meet those conditions, you're in a bad place. What determines whether or not something is just rezoning compared to spot zoning is the properties around it. So if you can justify that there's some commercial or there's mixed use or if there's residential or there's higher density, you can rezone one plot of land because if that plot of land is large. I'm using Mosino as an example. If that plot of land is large enough, right, for multiple different developments, that doesn't count as spot zoning, that counts as rezoning. Spot zoning would be if I took one little parcel inside the Mosino tract and I said that's industrial. And there's not a...
That's crazy.
I'm just saying, like, that would be spot zoning because it'd be like there's no relative argument that there's industrial in that area. So you're clearly spot zoning. So yeah, that would be the difference on that.
Makes sense. It's interesting because you told me this a few days ago and I did look into it. In the 1960s, it was put that municipalities can't exclude a use. And from what I was reading, it seemed like Delaware County was kind of a model for this. I guess, what does it mean for a township when they really don't want something like data centers?
Yes. So this is where people need to pay attention because, I mean, obviously I'm not pro data center. I know many people are not. But it's important that people know what the tools of government are so that they can properly advocate before the data center shows up. A lot of times in zoning, people don't find out about, like, people wait until the project is at their doorstep, at which point it could already be too late. Zoning is one of those things you need to get ahead of. We saw this a lot, and I'm going to use smoke shops because regardless of people's opinions on smoke shops, I'm going to use smoke shops because they were a recent example of this that actually happened in Upper Darby. We saw smoke shops basically became, I forget the year, but basically they started to proliferate. And a lot of it was in preparation for, I think a lot of people were believing that the state was going to legalize marijuana soon. God help us if that ever happens. Not God help us as in it would be a bad thing. I just mean, like, the point is with smoke shops, a lot of them were built with the ideas of becoming commercial dispensaries.
Yeah.
And so they proliferated across the board. The problem is there were almost no rules and regulations in anyone's zoning code because no one's zoning code was ever prepared for the legalization of marijuana. So most places either had just medical dispensaries and that was it, or they had nothing at all as it relates to anything related to marijuana, anything that related to smoking. Smoking was just considered something that was attached to a gas station, Wawa, that you would pick up, and it was set as like a very small portion of your sales or your surface area of your retail space. So what happened was, as these smoke shops started making applications, they kept making legal arguments that, well, you don't have it in your zoning code, so I can open up next to this school. Some municipalities...
Media Elementary, there's one like a block away.
Some municipalities tried to fight it. Every single one of them lost, including the city of Philadelphia. So what ended up happening was there was this rapid rush. How do we create requirements? And this is really important and really key. When you're creating these requirements, you cannot de facto ban through requirement. So one of the ones that you see with smoke shops is smoke shops can't be within so many feet of a school. What happens is when you take so-called that school, you draw a radius, then you find another school, you draw a radius, you draw a radius, you draw a radius, you draw a radius, and then you determine, are there going to still be places where a smoke shop can legally operate? If there are, then you've made a good zoning ordinance. And you've helped keep them away from the schools. You've helped regulate them. If you've basically banned them from the entire municipality, you're going to lose that in court. So that doesn't mean that there won't come a day, because I know for like smoke shops, for example, you can't be within so many feet of another smoke shop. So then you got to draw circles around the existing smoke shops. And then over time, it basically will get de facto banned. But then you have the legal argument.
It adds so much red tape to the point where it's not worth it.
But at that point, you have the legal argument that in court to say, well, all of the viable locations for a smoke shop are already taken up, so we just can't have another smoke shop. So then you win in court. Basically, you've made the argument that you've allowed it, you didn't ban it, but you put good faith restrictions on it, and the space has just run out. The government's not going to sit here and say, like, oh, Upper Darby doesn't have limited space. Like, they're not going to make that legal argument. That'd be crazy. But it's all in a process. So how does this affect data centers? Well, the good thing is the recent executive order that came from Shapiro actually, like, thank God, frankly, because he was being a real nuisance when it came to this issue. But he did something that was really important, which was empower the local authorities. He didn't preempt us. If anything, he gave local municipalities the preemption to stop projects, which that's huge. That doesn't happen a lot in zoning. That means every single municipality needs to be working their butt off right now, creating the strictest zoning ordinances they can possibly muster. Not banning. The second you ban it, you're screwed.
Yes.
You need to make the strictest
Yeah, you're fucked.
arguments that you can possibly make. Think of it like, I wish I didn't have to say it like this, but unfortunately, it kind of is this. You have to view zoning as a zero-sum game of competition. If you don't want something, then you need to make it very unaffordable for it to happen in your neighborhood, basically, so that they pick another neighborhood. It really sucks that they'll view it that way. The state is the one in charge, of course, of regulating the whole state. But when it comes to local municipalities, if you want to help ban data centers, you need to be helping create the strictest requirements. And you need to be encouraging your municipality to actively implement those zoning ordinances now, not later, because the second the developer already shows up and submits their land development, it's done. You can't retroactively change the zoning code because they're considered grandfathered in.
Yeah. Is there any instance in once a developer files a land development application, is there any instance in which the township can change the ordinance and then apply the new version to them? Or is that not
so
a thing?
It's only if they change the conditions. So usually for I'll use smoke shops, for example. Smoke shops are grandfathered in unless sold and change hands in the case of and also if they change their use. So say a smoke shop becomes a convenience store. Well, it can't become a smoke shop again because now it's under the new ordinance. But if a smoke shop is sold to another person as a smoke shop and it stays a smoke shop, it's still grandfathered in forever. It's really trash. It's literally the worst thing about local government.
So they're going to be there forever.
I mean,
those smoke shops are not leaving.
I don't know. There's this one smoke shop that just caught fire by the high school. And I know that the township is looking at it, making sure to be like...
Was it an accident?
Yeah, I believe so. But I think it was actually the property next door that caught fire. But it ended up closing that smoke shop, which is right by the high school. And I damn well know that this zoning hearing board, our zoning officer is staring at that smoke shop to see what happens, to be like, can I force them back into zoning to get them to basically kick them out because they're way too close to the school and under the new ordinance they wouldn't be allowed to. So they're definitely staring. So there are a couple of occasions where you can try.
How close to the school was it?
Way too close. It's right across the street. You can see the high school. It's at the corner of Lansdowne and State, right across from Severa's, right across from the...
That's way too close.
It's way too close.
That's insane.
It's in a little hole in the wall too. But I mean, the smoke shops have a lot of really strict requirements. I've seen some really good requirements come out of, I think it's Lower Merion, as it relates to obviously the battles that they're having up there in Montgomery County, which God bless them, because it is not easy, but thank God they have lawyers on lawyers on lawyers on lawyers. So they really picked an interesting place to pick a fight. They really picked one of the communities that had the most resources to actually fight this battle. So I'm actually really happy for them because they're fighting the battle not just for themselves, are actually fighting the battle for all of us. Because for every court case they win...
Setting the standard.
Exactly. Yeah. Every court case they win, we adopt. So I know we're working for zoning ordinance because we're hoping... Because, Upper Darby, we have a little bit more money. And we pay our solicitors probably... Well, they're full-time peeps. So for us, we try to help create model legislation for the rest of the county because, I don't expect East Lansdowne to be able to have the resources to really dive deep into zoning ordinances as it relates to data centers. But see, this is also the problem. Because we have so many small municipalities and they don't have the resources, they rely on the state and they rely on the county. And if they're not being proactive, like the state wasn't being proactive about 2 months ago, they were at the mercy. And that's what happened in Lower Merion. That's what happened in Montgomery County is they were at their mercy. And even though they had the resources, but by the time that those applications had already come in, they're rushing. They're rushing to, you'll start to understand this as a similar process to something else that's occurred. But I'm not going to say what. That's That's just private info. But you'll see that there's a lot of stalling happening in Montgomery County as it relates to their data center in an attempt to write their zoning ordinances as quickly as possible, set their standards as quickly as possible ahead of any subdivisions, ahead of any formal application.
Stressful.
It is time sensitive, which is why it is important. If data centers is an important issue to you, you need to be going to your local government and you need to be demanding that they update their zoning code. And you need to think of, what are your greatest concerns about data centers? What are things that you would want from, I'm not going to say there's a such thing as a good data center, but you can't ban it. So in that practice and in that line of thought, what would a data center need to do to be tolerable? Not good, tolerable, right? Like nobody likes the meat packing facility down the road, or nobody likes the coal power plant, but what would they need to do to be tolerable, right? So that's what people need to come into those conversations thinking. I'm a firm believer, yes, they need to produce their own electricity. There should be absolutely zero demand. In fact, I'm actually a proponent that they should be netting positive electricity back onto the grid. Would be the least they can do. Actually help lower electrical costs. Then that would actually start to change the conversation. Water consumption is not, in my opinion, the strongest of argument. You make a much better argument with the electrical, especially because PICO bills keep skyrocketing. There's already state programs to help people with electric bills. So it's something that the state government is used to dealing with, is high electrical prices. It's something that's politically salient across the state, from Republican to Democrat to independent. So that's a much better argument. The water argument's a more environmental argument. And unfortunately, that one splits on partisan divides. There's people that care, and then there's people that just don't. Yeah. I'm not saying it's not an important issue. I'm just saying, politically, strategy-wise, I would focus more on the electrical. I'd focus more on the environmental impacts of land use in general. I mean, a lot of these data centers are just concrete slabs. So if you want to talk about water, don't talk about the water consumption. Talk about stormwater management, right? Talk about how data centers are actually leading to flooding, because it's just a concrete slab. There's no drainage. It's this huge building that just runs water off into the streams. So, and you can even make the environmental argument that those data centers are putting more strain on our sewer systems, because a lot of our area has unified sewer and stormwater systems. So building a data center is going to increase the amount of sewage that enters our streams and our estuaries and our tributaries. So
tons of trickle-down
You
effects.
could literally just say data centers are, oh, I can't say that. I'm on recording. Data centers are literally increasing crap. There you go. Literally actually sending more crap into our streams. I was going to curse, and I was like, oh, I'm on recording. I can't do that.
You can. That's fine. How far into Upper Darby's data center ordinance are you guys?
Oh, well, we're just starting. So the good thing is I'm lucky to say that I don't think anyone's chomping at the bit to build a data center in Upper Darby. Thank God.
Yeah, I was going to ask, has anyone even approached the township for a warehouse or anything on?
We love our freaking storage centers. I'll tell you that much. But other than that, no. It's just something that, like I said, it's one of those things you want to be proactive about, you want to get ahead of. And thank God the recent executive order has really empowered local government. So people should be taking advantage of that. It's not every day the state government says, we will not process a single state permit unless there's approval by the local government. That means every single local government should be doing everything that they can to arm themselves with the tools necessary to deny, if they so please. If you don't do that, Another thing I was curious about was, because Upper Darby and Chadds Ford are totally different. Chadds Ford, their conditions were a 25-acre minimum and 40-foot height cap. Now, Upper Darby doesn't even have 25 acres just sitting around. Does that sort of make you guys safe, or does it just change the problem? Because these things can be different sizes. It doesn't have to be a 25-acre massive data center. It could be one in a basement. Yeah, so that's where we run into an issue, right? So our issue is not the massive complexes. I think what our major issue is going to be these proliferation of micro data centers, which we haven't seen much, but So the Christiana Care version of a data center? Christiana Care version of a data center. That is crazy. I mean, it's not necessarily feasible economically now, But once again, this is one of those things where you plan for the future. Technology tends to go in one direction, which is more small, more compact, more diversified, right? So if we're building massive data centers now, what's the future? Data center at home, right? Like, so we need to get ahead of it, because otherwise you're going to see these. I mean, technically, so we technically already have some regulations on this. I mean, like if we talk about server farms, right? And we talk about, I mean, we currently don't have regulations for this, right? So this is another blind spot in zoning. Zoning is my favorite because I feel like it's where all issues converge.
Oh, for sure.
You know, we don't really have much in the way of, so let's just take Bitcoin mining, right? There's currently nothing in most Pennsylvania zoning codes to prevent people from turning their entire homes into Bitcoin mining farms, which put extensive strain on the grid. The very similar problems to what a data center does. Of course, they're paying for their electric bill, so I guess that's where that evens out. But just because someone's paying for their electric bill doesn't mean it's not increasing strain on the system. And because it's in a home, it's even less regulated. So, you know, take, for example, when we had the heat wave and a lot of the federal government took a lot of data centers offline in the Northeast because it was straining our power grid. So that's great for the corporate ones. But if everybody proliferates these data centers for financial gain into their homes and houses, are those people going to turn off those data center or those micro data centers when there is a heat wave?
Christiana Care Centers.
Yeah, those Christiana data center. I don't think Christiana Care would appreciate us using this example.
No.
They'd be like, excuse me?
No, sorry.
But yeah, I mean, most people wouldn't turn them off, right? So the strain would still remain because unfortunately we live in a world where even if we're in a drought, people are still watering their front lawns. So you can't assume. So for Upper Darby, for more tightly packed municipalities, I think that's a bigger concern for us. Philadelphia has some concerns. I mean, look, Philadelphia has plenty of unused industrial land. It will not surprise me if one doesn't pop up there. The biggest issue for us, thank God, is we don't actually have like the transmission lines for the power needed. Like our community isn't built for industrial. It wasn't built for massive, take, for example, the massive pylons coming off of a nuclear power plant, right? Like you don't see those in Upper Darby, right? Most of our power lines are on telephone poles or old train lines, etc. It's not, and even our substations, they're just not built for the capacity needed, which is kind of a blessing, kind of a curse. But it is kind of a blessing because most places wouldn't even consider Upper Darby for a data center because we just don't have the infrastructure in place. Those newer communities, Chester County, Montgomery County, even Western Delco,
Chad's Ford,
prime for the picking. Even Upper Providence needs to be cautious. I mean, Springfield is taking a look at their...
Oh, God.
Hey, look, I'm being honest. Like,
I'm Upper Providence.
Upper Providence, you know, anywhere that's not really developed. I mean, even Chester needs to be concerned, I'll be honest, because, I mean, Chester suffers extensively from environmental racism. So, I mean, from the incinerator plant to...
The trash incinerator?
Yeah, the trash incinerator, to the establishment of the prison there, to the casino. Everyone, I don't, have you ever
played... To the attempt of the LNG terminal?
Have you ever played, did you ever play SimCity 4 when you were younger?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So you know how, like, the only revenue-generating buildings when you're really desperate is, like, the toxic waste dump and the federal prison and all of those other things? Yeah, that's Chester. That's literally Chester, right? So...
It's a good comparison.
Seriously, every time I look at Chester, I see SimCity 4 because when you're just starting off and you're struggling, because it has a casino, has a toxic waste dump, and it has the prison. It literally a 1-4. I'm like, did you guys base it off of Chester? And they're the only revenue generating. The same thing applies to data centers. I will not be surprised if we don't see that rear its ugly head down there because traditionally residents in Chester have lost that fight. So we need to be prepared to fight for them, and Chester needs to get ahead of it. Because it's something that, frankly, I don't know. Historically with Chester, like, you know, they've lost those fights. So it's important for us to be ready to stand up and fight for them, but also Chester needs to get ahead of it, and they need to pass a really strict zoning law now.
Yes.
And because obviously that's going to have an effect on the other neighborhoods nearby. So it's not, and because Delco is so micro-burrowed to death, what East Lansdowne does affects Upper Darby. I mean, I guess East Lansdowne could bulldoze its entire self and just build a data center, but I wouldn't have any control over it, right? So, like, that'd be crazy. But
how much communication are you having with other municipalities?
So,
in terms of, I guess, just coordinating these ordinances?
Right now it's very informal, but we're trying our best to get it more formalized so that we can kind of get it out more. We're doing a lot of it with the ICE ordinance right now. So we do talk to our other municipalities about the ICE ordinance to some degree so that they can, well, copy and paste is basically the goal here. Just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And just like we see with many other things, once one municipality does it, it makes it a lot easier for others to do it. Like we're all watching.
But I guess it wouldn't be a complete copy and paste because Chad's Ford's restrictions would be different than like yours, for example.
Requirements would be different, right? Like they can set their own requirements, but the legal arguments behind it would be the sound part, right?
The same. That makes sense.
And obviously Upper Darby's a home rule, so like we have a little bit of extra powers delegated to us. But I mean, look, no one's trying to like move a data center in the Wallingford, but I mean, you still just need to be careful, right? Like this is not something you want to be caught metaphorically with your pants down because like there's no recourse if not. And in fact, a lot of places should probably empower. I don't know if this is a legal argument. I would have to check with our team to make sure that this is a legal argument. So I probably shouldn't say it, but it is an idea because of the way that the governor wrote their executive order and all data centers requiring local approval. Just that all data centers should like if people put in their zoning ordinances that you know, it's going to require councilmatic approval. So whether it be a borough council, commissioners, et cetera, like all data center projects would require approval through the elected body. That would give an extra level of accountability. I would have to check to see if that's even a legal argument because they're different bodies, zoning and council. Like they even have their own different solicitors. They have their own lawyers because sometimes they can actually be on opposing sides. So you would have to check to see if that's possible, but if it is possible because of the way that the executive order is, every single municipality should be doing that. Every single municipality. Because it's an easy way to then just kill a project left and right.
Totally. Yeah, it was interesting. I actually went to the Delaware County Planning Commission this past week, and it was just ordinances coming through, and they were just reviewing these ordinances and giving recommendations. And Newtown Townships, they had to add two things that their draft didn't have, which was a closed loop cooling system and then a utility curtailment, which I didn't even really know what that meant. And then they also were requiring a full sound study because a resident caught that at the county meeting and they had no sort of noise standard for the soft hum. I guess would Upper Darby have any ordinance for that noise standard?
Well, we're going to have everything. I mean, for us, like I throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. So like, frankly, I'm not of the mind of taking any short measures. If I'm going to say waste my time, it's not a waste. That's just me being hyperbolic. But if I'm utilizing my time to try to solve a problem, I plan to solve the problem, not half-ass it, not take a short measure, not take a half measure. If we're going to spend our time, let's do everything known to man, which is exactly what we're doing with the ICE ordinance, which is why it's taken a little bit longer because there aren't that many ICE ordinances for municipalities of our size, like that have been updated since the era of the sanctuary cities. So we're kind of running a little bit alone. We're just using Philadelphia's as an example, but obviously like Philly's made some mistakes in their ordinance. And also they don't really have much in the way of enforcement provisions in their ordinance, which, you know, they're quickly finding out is actually a real problem. So yeah, my opinion is throw everything at the wall. So you're talking about the closed loop water systems. I've seen requirements related to gray water, using gray water instead of clean drinking water. I've seen things related to obviously stormwater management, parking requirements. See, now, ironically, that's actually what could get them in Upper Darby because we don't have anything in our zoning code. They might actually get classified as a warehouse, which they could get killed on the parking in Upper Darby. So, because there's just no way you would have the parking. Everyone complains about parking in Upper Darby, but like, I'm like, look, y'all, sometimes that's our saving grace because it means everything needs special approval, which means the government has to be involved in almost every project. So that protects you sometimes. So, but obviously that wouldn't be.
What happens if can you get like sued for a data center ordinance? And like who pays for that defense?
That would be the solicitor as a taxpayer, right? So that's why it's very important that like people understand this process because, and I'll be honest, are taxpayers going to complain about me spending money to defend their legal rights?
Yes.
I mean, sure. Well, no
Yes.
good deed goes unpunished, but
Yeah.
it's a better use of people's money than, say, if we were getting sued because we weren't trying or because we didn't put in the work and then we fought the battle afterwards. Because at least in this case, we're fighting a winning battle compared to fighting a losing battle. And if you're going to spend taxpayer money,
Totally.
you better win. Otherwise, why even fight it?
Yeah. It was funny. I actually didn't go to that meeting on Wednesday because the agenda was light, but you did touch on
Well,
that.
it still went till like 10:30, so
flock
it doesn't matter.
and ALP. Yeah, it did. It was like 3 hours long. You did say that you were working on legislation for automated license plate readers. So any future surveillance equipment would require an ordinance and public hearing. Could you walk me through what prompted you on that?
Well, so my police department's not going to like to hear this, but accountability is key. And right now, currently, and I'll just use Upper Darby Council for example. So sometimes things get done in Upper Darby Township without approval or without the knowledge of council or without knowledge of the public, which, in the past has been okay. Obviously, you can imagine with these types of technologies, that becomes a real issue. Like if my police department were to sign a contract, right? The only time I'm ever going to see it, a contract currently, is via resolution. And resolutions are very short, they're very simple, and they're not very detailed. And also there's no public hearing, right? So the public doesn't get a say on it. Only the public comment, like at the beginning of a meeting. So
public comment is commenting on the not detailed version.
Correct. But that would be it, right? Under the current system, that would be it. My opinion is if you're going to do anything that affects the rights of residents, that it should come through ordinance. Like you're actually fundamentally changing the law. Because once you change it by ordinance, it'll actually be public knowledge. This is the other problem with resolutions. They're not really compiled well in E-code. So it's kind of hard to what resolution did Upper Darby Council pass 3 years ago in June? I don't know. It's not like there's a repository, really. It's just more of us approving a contract. I don't really get to see the contract, though that is changing. That's actually why something was pulled off the agenda last meeting, was because we didn't actually have the agreement. So it was tabled because, Upper Darby government's getting its crap together. So for the first time. So
yeah, are you tired? You guys have had back-to-back-to-backs meetings.
Well, it's August. I can tell you this much, that as much as I love my fellow council members,
but isn't it supposed to be slow in the summer?
I'm tired of seeing them. But it is what it is. I do it for 4 years, and then at that point, I throw my hands up. I'm like, all right, somebody else take it. I'm not one of those career politicians. I'm here to do a job, get the job done, and then get out and move on with my life. So
yeah,
it's not like I don't have other things going on. So, but yes, so for the data center, or not data centers, for the license plate readers, for the flock cameras, I've currently established about 4 provisions that we want to explore. Implementation. 1, that they always have to go through ordinance. 2, that and this might be a controversial take, and people are gonna crucify me for it, but there are gonna be very, very, very limited occasions where this type of technology is useful. Very limited. One of the specific ones I'm gonna use is when we do have a hotspot of human trafficking. Those are one of the few occasions where we need information so that in the case somebody goes missing, we can take action on it immediately. So 69th Street Terminal specifically, it being a transit hub and seeing people move through it, that is one of the rare occasions where I'd be like, this technology could be useful, but within reason. And that's where this ordinance comes in. You have to specify the location. You have to specify specifically what information you are collecting. If it is found that you collect other information that isn't allowed, it terminates the ordinance. It terminates the contract. Immediate.
I think you also listed on Wednesday that the ordinance would need to spell out purpose as well.
Yeah, so what data you're collecting, the purpose.
Well, how do you define that?
Well, that's not up to me. I'm not the one making the request. That would be up to the police department, right? If the police department wants to use the technology, then the police department needs to come to council and the public and make that argument. I'm not saying they're incapable of it. I'm saying in fact, I'm saying the contrary. They can make the argument if it is valid. If it's not valid, then they won't be able to make the argument and it won't be approved. That is how the system's designed. That's how democracies are meant to work. The best arguments win and the worst arguments lose. That's how it's supposed to work. So basically the how, when, where, why, etc. Your W's. The other one is, I think this is important, duration. So that no contract or no authorization of the use of this technology is permanent. It is never infinite. you have to renew it. It's sunset. So like, okay, this ordinance, it's valid for 5 years, right? You can use this technology for 5 years, but in 5 years, you got to come back and you got to ask again. And that time, the next council is going to sit there and be like, okay, well, how many human trafficking cases has this actually solved? And if it hasn't solved a single one, and the purpose of it was to solve human trafficking, it's not getting approved, right? So that is providing that level of transparency and accountability, and then also data protection, which that is why the ICE ordinance is important. That's why a police oversight board is important, because I know we see a lot of times with, unfortunately, misuse of this technology. So that's why a police oversight board is important. That's why the ICE ordinance is important to protect the data. And then why there needs to be a transparent process around the approval of these things so that, and also there needs to be a distinction between that and a Ring camera. That one's a little messy because, well, it's a private property thing. And I mean, a lot of Upper Darby residents have good reason to have cameras on their front yard so that for not even just general safety issues, but also for like, insurance reasons, somebody crashed into my fence, well, it caught on the Ring camera. So now Allstate can't deny me.
Well, would the ordinance cover that?
It would distinguish them.
Equipment?
It would distinguish and separate them.
Because the DA signed contracts like 2 years ago, expanding their contract with Fusus Software, where they're asking the public to give police live access to their own private security feeds. So I didn't know if the ordinance was going to have any sort of language on private cameras.
Well, the good thing is most of it is all closed circuit. So, and for some odd reason, also still the crappiest footage known to man, even in the year of our Lord 2026. So, it's like I'm looking at like through like the lens of the first camera. So, it's not really even that useful, frankly. Not to the high definition of like license plate readers, but I think a lot of it is just about distinguishing. So, like when it relates to private property, like I can't control what a resident does with their own property. That being said, as it relates to like Ring cameras or private security cameras, the Supreme Court did actually, so one of the few things they did right this term is they cracked down on police overreach when it comes to tracking of private information, specifically with phones and location data. That is going to proliferate.
I'm shocked that they did that.
A win's a win, like broken clock, right? Twice a day.
I'll take it.
As they say.
Right.
So, I'll just take the win for privacy rights. It's good because that actually will proliferate into other different things. And that includes like accessing private home footage, video footage without a warrant, right? Once a warrant is issued, you kind of like lose the rights to these things. But without a warrant, like, no, there's not going to be live surveillance. The police, like, once again, if they wanted to do such a contract, they would have to, once again, come before council with an ordinance, with the reason and the explanation and the locations. Like, oh, we're trying to access the live feeds of the cameras of the businesses on 69th Street. Okay. Right? Like, and then you tell me why, and then you show the location, but all of this would be in public too. So the public would be would know about it. It's not like, it's not secret surveillance. It's public safety surveillance, right? Because the public knows about it. So I think one of our biggest issues when it comes to these flock cameras and stuff is a lot of this stuff is being done completely without any regard to the public, without any say, without any transparency. And 9 times out of 10, that's when you piss people off in government, whether it be the data center.
And no penalty for anything. Like Flock just changed its defaults this month. Their retention dropped from 30 days to I think it was 7. And now every search needs a case number, but departments can opt back into that 30 and there's really no penalty for anything.
Well,
So,
once again, it would, for us at least, and I hope other places, once we legally make it sound, other places would adopt this, that, I don't care what Flock is doing. I don't care what the private companies are doing. The governments are accountable to the government and to the people. So, whatever contracts would be signed with a company such as Flock, not that we would ever allow them to, but I'm just saying in hypothetical, if they were to sign a contract with them, I don't care about what their policies are because the only policies that will matter will be the policies that we have. And if I say it's 3 days of data storage, then it's 3 days. And then they got to go and find a company that allows them to do 3 days. The private market usually follows the government restrictions. Right now, there's no government restrictions, which is why they have this 7 and 30 option. But as governments slowly restrict it and restrict their own police forces, they want to stay in business. So Flock is going to change their policies and change their packages, so to speak, to model the local governments because obviously they want to sell contracts. So it's the government. They follow the government. So we have to take care of ourselves. We got to make sure that we're doing everything we can. And hopefully, once again, this will be another model ordinance that we can pass. There's also some separations we need to do when it comes to these surveillance cameras, especially when we talk about speeding cameras and red light cameras, right? So red light or the speeding cameras, specifically if you're talking about the ones in Philly, the ones that keep giving everyone tickets that everyone hates. Well, I know everybody hates them. I kind of like them. Sorry. And in fact, like, I'm not going to lie as I sit here and say that we're not currently actively exploring the process of trying to get some of these cameras on some of our major streets because we have a lot of issues with speeding. And frankly, we need to get that
big problem.
Yeah, and we need to get it under control. Unfortunately, like Westchester Pike turns into a drag race all the time. And we need to get this under control. And in fact, it's actually a little bit safer to have, this is going to be a crazy statement coming from me. It's a little bit safer to have a robot do it with a human checking than to have a human do it where human biases are playing in because, like, frankly, I mean, I'm not saying robots don't have biases. Of course they do. They're programmed by people that have biases. But my point is having them checked by a human as like the security is actually probably a safer metric. The other option is I can increase traffic stops. Well, we can already see what the problem is with that because increasing traffic stops doesn't necessarily make the community safer. It actually might endanger the community depending on who's doing the traffic stop. I'm going to be honest. So that, you know, I'd actually rather a camera give you a ticket than pull you over and risk an interaction, frankly, that could go south.
That's
so
fair.
Because at least in that case, everybody goes home safe for the most part.
I wanted to back up real quick because I wanted to go through the process of how these license plate readers end up coming to the public. Is it that the police department comes to the township with a resolution and then it goes through the standard process?
How's it work currently? Okay,
Yeah.
so how does it work currently? So currently I have yet to, well, that's not true. There was one and I voted against it. It was the first thing I voted against on council. There was East Lansdowne has been putting up these surveillance cameras, and I don't know, somebody needs to look into it because and I voted against it because I didn't have enough information. And basically what happened was Bernhardt, well, he was there to explain it. Bernhardt's our superintendent, to those that don't know. Bernhardt was there to explain it a little bit, but it was to install a camera on one of our light posts because, you know, the borders are Gore in Upper Darby. So East Lansdowne needed I guess it's a surveillance camera on one of our poles for security. They had like some type of a program. And so because they were putting it on our telephone pole, our police department had an MOU and an agreement with East Lansdowne that we had to approve. And so I was looking at it and I remember, see, nobody else caught it, but I was reading the news recently beforehand and I had heard about these cameras and I was wondering if this program was the same program because the program mentioned that they would be using artificial intelligence in the cameras. Like the cameras would be, this was before Flock was really kicking off as a major issue. But even back then I was like, well, I asked them, I said, do these cameras use artificial intelligence? I couldn't get a straight answer, so I voted no on the resolution, right? So that would be the current check on power, right, would be that we would vote those things down. But once again, with a resolution, I don't always have all the information. So that's why I think moving it to an ordinance is mandatory, especially when you're talking about such sensitive things. And we can create whatever rules we want for ourselves. This is what people forget when it comes to government. You have to think outside the box. What has been done is not all that can be done. In fact, it's usually not even a fraction of what can be done. The state does preempt us on a lot of nonsense, which is really irritating. But when it comes to how we do our processes, we have full reign. Full reign.
Yeah, I mean, the saying, it's cliche, but everything that's innovative, any innovative policy ordinance starts at the local level and trickles up. There's never anything that starts at the federal level and trickles down. So all these municipalities
You trying to
and
tell me,
counties that
Nick,
are
that
trying to
trickle
figure
down
it out,
economics doesn't work? That's crazy. What do you mean? Billionaires, they have the lowest taxes in history, Nick. What are you talking about? You're not swimming in cash? No, I love the trickle-down economics argument because Pennsylvania still has a minimum wage of $7.25, and last time I checked, New York City is not vacating to Allentown. Last time I checked, so I don't see. Even though the minimum wage over there is like what, $25, but people aren't moving to Allentown. Businesses aren't moving to Allentown. Wall Street's not moving to Allentown. So what is the point of having this low minimum wage? Because every argument about, oh, well, you know, it's going to drive businesses away. Where? They weren't here to begin with, and they're not coming. We have even a lower minimum wage in
It's
West
an asinine
Virginia.
argument.
So,
yeah,
I digress. Thanks, PA Senate.
Another thing on the license plate readers. I did read that there were departments in several states that were caught running searches with immigration or ICE as the reason. What are you going to add into your ordinances?
Well, so that's where the ICE ordinance comes in, right? That's where our ICE ordinance comes in. I consider this a full package. It's a full package of protecting the privacy rights and the constitutional rights of all residents in Upper Darby. And it's unfortunately not a one and done. It's a 3-part process. All 3 parts need to be done for this to work. One is the ICE ordinance that protects any information as it relates to immigration status. Like Upper Darby is not participating in that whatsoever, right? And our police would not be, if they are police cameras, unless there is a judicial warrant, which if there's a judicial warrant, we have to abide by it. So, but if there's a judicial warrant, fine, they can have access. But usually warrants specify very specifically what information they're looking for, where they're looking for it, et cetera, et cetera. You can't just oh, I have a warrant, I can access everything. That's not how warrants work. It has to be, okay, you get access and the police are like, okay, well, you want it on this date and time and location, here it is, right? And that's it. That's all they get. Now,
have you spoke to Jen at all, Jen O'Mara, in regards to her privacy bill?
No, I have not spoke with Jen specifically. No, how do I put this in a nice way? I got to think of ways. I don't pay attention too much to what goes on at the state level because of the PA Senate. So I know most things die in the House. So the reality is that I can't count on it for anything. As much as I can sometimes appreciate the work, it usually just ends up being indifferent to me. I'm on my own. I'm on my own until and if the Senate changes, or if the Senate wakes up and decides to have our. So I have to just pretend that no help is coming. But no. So when it comes to ICE, the ICE ordinance handles that. That protects the data. That protects the township. That protects the police department. That protects the immigrants. That prevents any of those news articles that you've seen from happening. And if you look at those situations where it has happened, you'll notice they don't have any protections or information protections or anything that is standing up for immigrants. There is no ICE ordinance. There is no.
So that language needs to be in the ICE ordinance, not the license plate reader ordinance.
It's all would you want it in the code, right? It'll all be in the code, like the Upper Darby code. It'll just be a different section, but they all apply simultaneously. They don't need to all be in the same section. If I need to, we can always reference it in the actual flock ordinance. I'm just calling it the flock ordinance because I don't know what else to call it. So, and then the other one is, and as we talked about it with the police departments that have sometimes abused the technology, that is why a police oversight board is important. Because there has to be some type of outside oversight to ensure that if these things ever did happen, that there is a way for justice to be served, for there to be some type of investigation that's impartial. You cannot have a department investigate itself. I don't know why that is a concept that anybody accepts, that you cannot investigate yourself. That is not how that works. That's not a fair process. Because if I went up to my police department and I said, is it okay if the criminal investigates themselves and determines whether or not they committed a crime? They would look at me like I was crazy. But the second that I say the same thing about the police department, then they get all defensive and act like I'm the evil one. And I'm just sitting here aren't you guys for the institution of policing? Why are you so against being policed? Aren't you pro-police?
They don't want to be policed.
Yeah, the irony.
Police others, but not be policed yourself.
Well, I think it's an important process because then they help to understand their effects on the community.
Yes, totally.
But so that will protect police abuse. The ICE ordinance protects immigrants, and the flock ordinance protects how do I say this? The public's right to oppose.
Everyone.
So the public's right to have privacy. So those 3 things in conjunction really do a massive overhaul of privacy rights here in Upper Darby, and a really massive overhaul for the modernization. So, and the hope is that other places will join us in passing those three ordinance packages. And then also the data center one, because that one also is in fact a privacy issue as well, because you're talking about private property rights, we're talking about neighborhood. But once again, it's another issue where people don't feel like they have a say in the process. So we got to make sure that they feel like they do.
Yeah. And I was trying to think of other things that would need this type of ordinance as well, because all of these fights, zoning, data centers, cameras, they all come down to whether the county or the township wrote something down before the actual developer showed up. What are some other things that we need to be top of mind so we're not left scrambling in like a year from now?
Oh, what are some other ones? So this is an old one.
I guess we won't know until we know.
Yeah, and this one's an old one, but a lot of people have not addressed it or they left it by the wayside. Affordability. People forget that this is an old one, but it is still a prevalent one. People, especially if you want more development in your town, this is a big thing for Upper Darby right now. If we talk about development in Upper Darby, if we talk about, redevelopment of downtown, if we talk about, increasing height restrictions or height limits, if we talk about higher density or mixed use, every single one of those reforms needs to have provisions that mandate affordable unit percentages. Every single reform. Because that is the only way that you can ensure that your community is not going to get gentrified. I mean, there still will be gentrification. Like, that's also another thing to, understand. That gentrification is almost, unfortunately, synonymous with development. But you can do it in a way, especially because, most municipalities can learn from other people's mistakes. We can talk about things like right of first return. We can talk about things like not just affordability percentages, but what type of units are affordable. Are they just studio? Are they multifamily? Are they 2-bedroom? So all of those things play into, at least I would say, this greater zoning reform package that places need to get ahead of, because you can't implement affordability after the proposal submitted. You're seeing this happen with the Lozino track a little bit, but I can't, after land development is already submitted, then ask for affordable units. I mean, a developer could promise it, doesn't mean they're going to stick to it. That's kind of the reason why it's not something you want to wait on. But affordability can sometimes be the hard
All you can do at that point is get them on record, right?
That just protects us a little bit legally when we make the reform. Kind of hard to go to court and say, I'm suing for something that I agreed to in public. Right? That's what that is. But I would say the other issues to think about is affordability. I'm not a big fan of parking requirements, but that's a side note. I mean, we talked about smoke shops. I mean, it really depends on where the market goes these days. I mean, for us, we see a lot of illegal rentals and stuff like that, but that's more of an L&I enforcement issue. When you're talking about zoning law, I mean, really, it's one of those things you just got to pay attention to. Look at what's happening elsewhere and make sure that you're ahead of the curve. So,
now that I'm thinking about it, when pubs and bars started in the U.S., they were probably right next to elementary schools.
Oh God, yeah. Oh God. But the thing is, the institution of zoning doesn't really start until the late 1900s. So, and
really,
it's not old. Zoning is not old. And frankly, I mean, if I'm talking about the history of Upper Darby specifically, I mean, there was some general zoning, but not really. I'm going to be honest. It's nothing like what it is today, where zoning is this whole institution in and of itself. But I mean, Upper Darby is a good example of this and I love talking about this little history because it's such a quirk that nobody understands or realizes. But if you look at 69th Street and you ever wonder, why are there these huge department stores on 69th Street? And then right behind it, there are these mansions. I mean, they don't look like mansions today, but in the 20s, those were mansions. Why are there mansions next to a transit terminal? Well, because when Upper Darby was laid out, it followed the 1919 Supreme Court case that banned zoning on race. Upper Darby was the very first attempt at wealth-based race discrimination. That the goal was to make the property so unaffordable that Black residents would not be able to afford to move in. That is why, because they couldn't zone based on race anymore. So it was the first foray into redlining, or what would become redlining. But in this case, it was by de facto banning communities by making the property so expensive that they would have never been able to live there. That's why you see mansions today right next to a transit terminal, which makes no damn sense. Those should be apartment buildings. But that is why.
Yeah, wow.
It is literally, because those things were built in 1924? So literally 5 years after that Supreme Court case. So yeah, it is literally just a product of racism, all of downtown.
Real quick, but before we wrap it up, I do want to give you your Sunday,
Oh.
Because it is Sunday morning. What should residents specifically be doing in their municipality as it relates to data centers and these license plate readers?
They should be asking their governments to work with their solicitors to develop policies and work with residents to make sure that their concerns are being addressed. And they should be taking action now. I know budget season's coming up for a lot of municipalities, so they might be hamstrung, but this is something that should be being done in the background for implementation or passage early next year. And if every municipality is working on it simultaneously, we may get 10, 20 different products, all looking a little bit different. But that also helps us, frankly, because when the policies are a little bit different borough to borough, well, it makes it really hard actually for developers, because then they don't know what the hell they're doing and they don't know where to go. It also makes it really hard.
For sure. And they have to deal with all these different municipalities.
They also have to sue every
that are
single
all
time.
different.
That's a lot of lawsuits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they are billion-dollar corporations, so they have more money than we do. But, you
know. So maybe Pennsylvania and our little fiefdoms are coming to benefit us.
There's ways that it can be used for our benefit. But it requires residents going now, speaking up, and asking the right questions, because government only works when you ask the right questions. If you go up and you just complain about it, in one ear, out the other. You go up and you say, I want a zoning ordinance for data centers in this municipality. If we do not pass one, then we have no control over what happens with these data centers. Do your job and work with the solicitor and get a zoning ordinance together. And then bring the public on board and ask for our feedback. That's the right question. And if a government ignores that, then you need new leaders. Because that is a very valid question.
For sure.
That isn't even an attack. It's just, this is something I want to work on. And most governments, regardless of party, will be
totally valid.
Okay, sure, let's work on that, right? Like, they're not going to be opposed to that. I mean, they shouldn't be. Like I said, if they are, then, well, you need a new government. I digress.
That's a different convo.
Same thing applies, though, for the license plate reader. That, we should be passing an ordinance that regulate these license plate readers and make sure that the public will always have a say in the process.
Totally. Awesome. Cool. Well, we have been speaking with Kyle McIntyre. Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nick.